Welcome, and here's how we're going to run today. We're going to have 3 presentations. We're going to start with Alan Kenner talking about the definition and nature of burnout, the effect of altruism on burnout, and a little bit on government bureaucracy and burnout. That will be followed by me talking about problems with goals, and because of its popularity today, I have to make some comments on the big famous concept today, mindfulness. And then after that, Jean Moroney will talk about strategies for dealing with burnout, and our plan is to have half an hour at the end for questions. So, Ellen.
So in the Fountainhead, while Peter Keating is celebrating winning the Paris Prize at his graduation, a 4-year scholarship to the École des Beaux-Arts, and after being offered a career path by Guy Franchon at his esteemed architectural firm, Peter has a stray thought. It's funny, Keating remembered. At one time, he had wanted to be an artist. It was his mother who had chosen a better field in which to exercise his talent for drawing. Architecture, she had said, is such a respectable profession. Besides, you meet the best people in it. She had pushed him into his career. He had never known when or how. It's funny, thought Keating. He had not remembered that youthful ambition of his for years. It's funny that it should hurt him now to remember. Well, this was the night to remember it and to forget it forever. What does Peter do to his own personal values? Peter is aware of a contrast. Peter says to Howard Roark, "You know," said Keating, honestly and unexpectedly even to himself, "I've often thought you're crazy, but I know that you know many things about it. Architecture, I mean, which those fools never knew. And I know that you love it as they never will." Who do you think will be in a vicious downward cycle, losing motivation, losing himself, burning out, buried dreams, self-murdered dreams? The questions for all of us are, how do I choose my job or career? Do I give myself the freedom to choose? And if so, what moral standard guides me? Altruism, selflessness, egoism, or a tangled mess of the two? Same for romance. I was told by my dad that the most important thing in life is the man's ego. That's my husband. Luckily, I discovered Ayn Rand for both of us. It's lucky. I would have gone down that road. Same for hobbies. Do you choose your hobbies by what you love? Swimming, dance, golf, Broadway. Same for friends. Are you allowing yourself to be a passionate valuer in choosing your friends? And same for family relations. Irma Bombach had a title of her book that said, "Family Ties That Bind." Anyone know the end of that? And gag. So, do you set healthy boundaries for yourself? Love the family members you love and distance the ones you don't love. It matters. If you go down the path of choosing your lifetime goals based on not what you personally want, but rather on pleasing others, or fueled by unrealistic expectations or self-doubt, you may be headed for motivational burnout. The term burnout originally referred to a rocket's depletion of fuel. Early in the 1980s, Herbert Freudenberger and Christine Maslish popularized the term emotional burnout. It was first studied in the helping professions, nurses, doctors, psychologists, and teachers. Why? Because of the nature of their work, intense involvement with the lives of others, because of some personal attributes such as perfectionism, and because of organizational factors, lots of those, bureaucratic rules and lack of autonomy being two of them. So notice there are both internal and external factors involved in burnout. In a book titled Coping in Personality in the Workplace, Ed and I have a chapter, Burnout and the Battle for Your Own Happiness. And you better believe that we focused on how to cope with altruism. From that chapter, let's look at the experience of burnout. I feel like this is the opposite of what you're on to the other day. So hold tight, we're getting to solutions. Imagine waking up in the morning and dreading yet another day at work. You dread even having to get out of bed. You feel humorless, grumpy, anxious, bitter, and depressed. Perhaps you wish you were sick. Anyone ever do that? So you could avoid work and get some needed rest. You know you're falling behind at work. You have projects that require your attention and phone calls you haven't made. And part of you just doesn't care. Part of you does, though. You feel guilty and exhausted just thinking of facing your boss or your clients. You may no longer care much about their lives, and you try to force yourself to show some interest. The guilt and shame are weighing you down, and perhaps you notice you've cut yourself off from coworkers, family, and friends. You may have stopped exercising or dropped out of a hobby you once loved, and physically you may feel like you're just falling apart, suffering from back pain, headaches, stomach problems, and you just want to go back to sleep, or escape by having yet another drink or popping another pill. You may have no desire to spend time with your spouse, let alone enjoy an intimate moment together. You may find yourself short-tempered and critical or worse toward your kids. Privately, you may barrage yourself with seemingly unanswerable questions, also known in cognitive therapy as negative rhetorical questions. They're bogus questions, very bad questions. What's wrong with me? Why can't I get myself going? Why is the world set against me? Why me? You've lost or perhaps never fully discovered your personal rocket fuel, your proactive motivation, the energy and enthusiasm in life that builds your confidence. Instead, you're swimming in self-doubt. You're at a low point, and you may not see a way to rescue yourself. So notice here, burnout symptoms are both psychological and physical, affecting both your mind and body. And it involves not only cynicism, indifference, and emotional cutoffs from others, but sadly, intense self-criticism. You feel you're not the person you should be. What word pops out there? Should. It's a duty premise. So burnout is an enduring state of mind and body characterized by three things. Emotional exhaustion, you're wiped out. The second is depersonalization, which is a negative, cynical attitude, and emotionally distancing yourself, detaching yourself from others. And the third is a diminished sense of personal accomplishment. It's a loss of confidence and a lowered motivation to work with worsening performance. At first, it was only studied in the area of career, again, with the nurses and doctors and teachers and psychologists. And then they broadened the term. It's now applied to marriage, with parenting, in friendships, in a hobby, or in several or all of these areas. So as I mentioned, there are both internal and external factors that contribute to burnout, but the most insidious one, what do you guess it is? Altruism, I heard it. So how does altruism affect burnout? Well, we know, I'm one of them. Most people, I hope I'm a lot more cured now since I'm a psychologist, but most people have mixed moral codes. They feel some proper egoistic pride for their success, but it's poisoned by altruism, the code that tells them that self-sacrifice is the standard of morality. Try setting goals. Remember Peter's, how he set goals? By altruism. Whose goals are they? Anybody but yours. As Sharon said in his talk yesterday, altruism is not easy to uproot. I'm still uprooting it. I get back in my family and I go back into some of the same family dynamics. Not that often, though. Thank you, Ayn Rand. As with political liberty, protecting your own psychological liberty requires eternal vigilance. You are monitoring for altruism, and whenever I find it in myself, I go, yay. Guess why? Because if you don't see it, you can't uproot it. So you want to figure out how to reverse whatever mistake you make and learn how to truly value yourself. So the tragedy of altruism was poignantly exposed by an art teacher in one of the books. Ed and I wrote that chapter, so we read a whole bunch of books on burnout. One was called The Joy of Burnout. I love the title. How the End of the World Can Be a New Beginning. Now, I'm not recommending this in terms of it's not written by an objectivist, but they all books, many of these books have a lot of good tips. And this book had the best examples I had seen of how altruism but she doesn't name it that way, how altruism destroys your happiness in life and leads to burnout. This is from the art teacher, an example. She put, quote, "Being me and achieving something was tantamount to being selfish while someone else suffered or went without." And the author herself tells her story. She wanted to be a good girl, even into adulthood. She describes trying to be wonderful to everyone and how that gave her a glow. And you don't have to raise your hand here, but it might resonate with some of you. Quote, however, she says, quote, "The glow never lasted too long anyway, before I'd be forced to notice that I had ignored someone's need, or that someone else was kinder than me. I'd go into overdrive to prove that I would do anything for anybody and nothing for myself," unquote. So we know the literal meaning of altruism is otherism. It means that your highest moral purpose, the justification for your existence, is to sacrifice your life and happiness for others. And we've been told that since childhood. You're good if you share your toys with the kid you hate. You're good if you give up your career for Peter's mother. We all have to give it up for her mother, right? Or if you give up your career entirely for your abusive father. So the helping professions are especially prone to such selflessness. Another author who wrote a book on burnout called Fried describes stages of burnout. And one of these stages, they're kind of random, but one of these stages is putting your own needs last. And she elaborates on the martyr syndrome with its accompanying negative emotions such as guilt and depressions. So I'm going to give you from this book the example of one person who is beset by inner conflict as a consequence of having altruism as her moral standard. I gave you a few little examples, but this is my favorite. It's an excerpt from this woman's burnout diary. This woman is an author. She wrote many books. Evidently, she's very popular in Britain. We can ask Godfrey about that. Adrian Mole diaries. Her name's Susan Townsend. And she wrote articles and books and plays, and she wrote TV and film scripts. She wanted success, and she achieved it. And she felt guilty because of it. And she tried to appease her guilt by giving to everyone without concern for herself. By the way, she was strongly on the political left. That was very important to her. So she said, quote, "I felt nothing about," I'm going to read a series of quotes from her burnout diaries. Quote, "I felt nothing about my own welfare. I would never have been able to say to someone, 'I'm tired, I'm going to lie down now.' I was giving hugely to everyone, including my husband, doing everything he asked me to do, becoming the person he wanted me to be. But I obviously couldn't do that wholly. I had my own life going on inside my head. I had my own life going on inside my head. I didn't know how to say no. I just obeyed people. I had no self-esteem at all. And the more successful I became, the less it seemed I had. The glittering prizes of success were within my grasp, and I wouldn't quite reach my hand out to take them, though I wanted them. I was afraid I'd lose something else, my family and friends, the safe people. I was always very nervous about seeming different. It was to do with people saying, she's getting above herself. She thinks a lot of herself. She's a snob. She's superior. That was massively important to me. And I was also loyal to my class. You can't, that's cannot, be successful and working class. I'm the disappeared one. You're immediately promoted to a different class. So how do you think she coped? She coped by being ridiculously neglectful of herself, allowing her body to break down. This was the only way she allowed herself to get rest without guilt. She had very serious illnesses. She paid a psychological and physical price for the moral ideal of altruism. So altruism takes away both your happiness, your money, your spirit, and your spiritual reward, the earned pride that comes with success. So unlike Peter Keating, pay attention to your stray thoughts about your own personal values. So the takeaway so far is that, number one, a selfish solution to burnout is to be a rational egoist. Embrace subjectivism. Make it your own for yourself, not for anybody else. Identify and choose values that you personally love in your career, in romance, in your hobbies and interests. Don't sacrifice your happiness for others. Number two, choose your values and goals independently, not like Peter. Everything's not like Peter. Liberate yourself from this life sentence of constantly comparing yourself to others. So Ellis is talking to Dagny, Ellis Wyatt, is talking to Dagny in the Valley. This is from the Fountainhead, if there's some new people here. He said, what greater wealth is there than to own your own life and spend it on growing? So that's the key point I want to make on altruism. But burnout can happen among people who have very good self-esteem. It can occur and they don't have altruism or not much of it. So altruism is the deepest internal reason. So I want to take a quick look at one external cause of burnout not involving a loss of self-esteem. This is burnout stemming from a loss of autonomy in your career due to bureaucratic rules and regulations. In Atlas Shrugged, the looters are putting more and more controls on Hank. And at one point, Hank is just trying to find the raw materials, and he can't find them, so he has to be a scavenger. And Dagny says to him, "Tired, Hank?" And Hank answers, "Bored to death." There was a time, she thought, when his mind, his energy, his inexhaustible resources had been given to the task of a producer devising better ways to deal with nature. Now they were switched to the task of a criminal outwitting men. She wondered how long a man could endure a change of that kind. Bureaucratic controls are currently contributing to a national epidemic now in the medical profession. From an article that Ed sent me in the Wall Street Journal, hospitals address widespread doctor burnout. The National Academy of Medicine noted that more than half of U.S. physicians exhibited signs of burnout, a syndrome marked by a high degree of exhaustion and a low sense of personal accomplishment. Well, the solution is easy. The solution is get wellness programs for doctors. But the chief wellness officer from Stanford Medicine said, quote, "Telling doctors to eat granola, do yoga, and be more resilient isn't going to address this problem. And we are at risk for more medical errors and malpractice. Doctors are feeling isolated, And there is now not a doctor-patient relationship, but a doctor-computer-hospital-bureaucracy-patient relationship. So I have a lot more information on that. But one person in this article, I read a lot of the doctors back and forth on the Wall Street Journal. One person said, who was commenting, one doctor said, "Sometimes I wish doctors could behave like school teachers and simply strike." So notice here that it's an external factor that leads to burnout, bureaucratic rules and regulations. And now I will turn it over to Ed, and he is going to talk about problems with goal setting that can lead to burnout. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Now, generally, we find pleasure and satisfaction in achieving our goals, and that makes us happy. But, a big but, it really matters a lot what goals you set and how you approach them. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, some errors in choosing goals, and you'll find some overlap, because objectivists tend to agree with each other. So the first error, let me read some examples. All your roommates from college decided to go to law school. And they said, "Come on to law school with us. It's an important position. You meet important people. You're high status and you make good money. Come on and join us." You want to be a veterinarian. It's not quite as high status. So you go along with them, and as I guess about 30 or 40% of lawyers do, you hate being a lawyer. And then you feel stuck after a certain point because your whole income depends on being a lawyer. Status seeking. Work to prove you're better than others. Here's a quote. This isn't made up. Here it is. "He who dies with the most toys wins." Now, I didn't make this up because I met somebody who advocated this openly and said so, and he bought the toys. What's the purpose of the toys? To prove to others what a big shot you are. How about fame? Now, it's not wrong to want to be famous with a certain qualification. Remember, fame is greatness in the eyes of others, but the question is, whose standards do you follow? Now, Ayn Rand wanted to be famous, but only on her own terms. She wouldn't let anyone change one word of anything she wrote, and would get infuriated if someone suggested it. If they made a good editorial suggestion, like in the early version of The Fountainhead, she said, "Well, yeah, you're right, I'm going to change that." But it was her standards and her choice. So she wanted to be famous on her own terms. Grandiosity. Aspiring to an achievement beyond your capability because you want to be famous, but without the needed knowledge and skills. I once, a long time ago when I did therapy, had a patient who was a waiter in a restaurant. He wanted to become president. I said, "Of what?" He said, "Of the United States." And I knew a doctor who wanted to be a Nobel Prize winner. I said, "Well, how are you going to do that?" He was a medical student, never achieved anything. So again, grandiosity means achieving things beyond your actual capabilities and skills. So what's the common element? Of course, a hyphenated word, right? What's the hyphenated word? Second-handedness, as Ellen was talking about. So even when goals like this are achieved, they lack personal meaning, and you can feel burned out by middle age, saying, "I did all of those things. It doesn't mean anything to me. This isn't what I wanted." When I was in grad school, there were people who burned out. Fortunately, they changed professions, but they were burned out at 40 in the career they had previously chosen. Now, Peter Keating, as Ellen mentioned, Peter Keating had one personal selfish goal. He wanted to be an artist. Gave it up. Whether he would have been any good, I don't know, but he gave it up. Okay. So, as Ellen said, you got to find something you personally love. So let's turn to another kind of error, picking without thought based on emotional whim. Gosh, that would be nice fun to be a doctor. Oh, that would be fun to be a lawyer. Well, that would be fun to be a physicist. But no actual investigation of the nature of the job. What would it actually mean? What would it involve? What do I know about it? How do I know I would like it? You have to try stuff based on your best judgment. When I was in college, I liked psychology, and I was interested in business. I didn't know what to do. I had an advisor who said, why don't you go into industrial psychology, and you can combine the two. I didn't want to do rat psychology, so I did it. And I said, I'll try it. I'm not sure, but it sounds interesting. Fortunately for me, I loved it. If it hadn't worked out, I would have done something else. All right, let's turn to a third category, frustration, disappointment, and negative outcomes. Ellen mentioned boredom. There's no new challenges in this kind of job or career. Blocked progress in your career can be a lot of reasons. Genuine politics, false favoritism of somebody who doesn't deserve it. That can be injustice. That can be your own misbehavior due to a moral compass problem. That can be a lack of growth in your skills. You can have limitations in your skills and abilities. You can dislike the lifestyle. I don't like to travel 20 days a month and be away from my family. I don't like 100-hour weeks. It's just an option. You don't have to like it. So sometimes it leads you to believe maybe this isn't the best thing for me. So you ask yourself, what's fixable? Can I improve my moral compass? Can I improve my skills? Can I go to a different profession or organization? And accept in a rational way what you can't control. It's very important to accept reality if it's clear what you can do and what you can't do. And then search for alternatives, new professions. I had grad students in my doctoral program who were age 45. In my doctoral students when I was a professor, age 50. Now, in those days, they could get jobs. They all did very, very well. They left something they didn't like, turned to this, and had wonderful careers. Now it would be hard to get hired at that age, but they were always very glad and had good careers even at age 50. They did something they really wanted to do. Okay, mindfulness. Where are we? Okay. Now, this is a real mess. Basically, genuinely, if you try to figure out what does it actually mean underneath it all, it's an attempt to reduce stress. And it's gotten huge attention in recent years. It's faddish. There are many gurus selling training programs. They claim research support based on really poor studies. They have salesmen who do this, and then others claim the salesmen are no good because they're too materialistic and making money off it, which is sinful. What's the real problem here? There's too many meanings in the literature. Now, I did a lot of research on this. I looked at Wikipedia. Some of my findings are in my free will book. I looked at a magazine published by Time Incorporated, whole issue devoted to it. There was a special issue in a professional publication. I talked to professional colleagues, and a major review article in Perspectives in Psychological Science, a journal I subscribe to. So what's going on here? I'll give you an idea of some of the meanings. It started with Buddhism. Now, you know, Asian religions generally are against reality. They want you to focus on consciousness as the end-all of being conscious. And they don't like reality very much. And they want you to retreat from reality. And so Buddhism can be involved very much with spiritualism, which focus on the internal, much more so the external, and of course religion works in. Most common use is meditation, and there's nothing wrong with meditation, but it already has a name called meditation. And you sit there and you think about an object and try to relax yourself, and that's okay if it helps you. It's not it doesn't work for me, but it's a personal thing. If it works for you, go ahead. Relaxation through deep breathing, okay. Paying attention to your immediate surroundings. Well, you better when you're driving, not on texting. But what about the future? Being non-judgmental. Well, sometimes that's valid. Can you tell me a sphere where objectivism would say, don't be judgmental? This is very important. About your emotions. about your emotions. Emotions are automatic. You don't judge yourself based on emotions. You didn't choose the emotions, they're automatic. What you want to do about an emotion, maybe you don't like the emotion, you understand its causes. Do you have wrong ideas, wrong premises? Then you work to change the premises. And then you can work eventually to de-automatize the emotion. But it's not being non-judgmental about your entire life and how you act on a daily basis. Self-compassion. Well, maybe if something terrible happened to you that you didn't cause, yes. Acceptance of things as they are, well, yes or no, depends. Some things are, and they're real, and they happened, okay? Then the question is, okay, do you have to accept that in the future? Removing stressors, such as turning off your iPhone. Okay, some of the time that's probably a good idea. Getting good sleep, good. Sex, objectivism is pro-sex. An optimistic outlook, well, it depends. You have to focus on what's real in the best judgment you can make. Healthy eating and eat slowly. Okay, if that works for you. Reduction of multitasking. Multitasking makes you too nervous. Yes, that's a good thing. You can solve problems by fixing that. Having faith, of course, that's religion. Yoga. My wife likes yoga. I don't like yoga. Whatever works for you. But here's the problem. I found 18 meanings of this concept in the literature. 18 meanings, most of which I read you. So I would characterize this as an invalid concept. There are things dumped into the garbage pail, the lid's put on, and you put a label on it, mindfulness. It's not the way you form concepts. There's no conceptual common denominator here. There's no integrating principle for all these examples. And the recent review article in one of my journals by 15 authors from all around the country and the world pretty much agree with my assessment. This is a mess because no one's clear what they mean by it. And it's totally divorced from Ayn Rand's view of a legitimate concept, even though the individual examples in a context can be fine. Here's a funny thing. People love this concept so much, they've now relabeled meditation mindfulness meditation. So I'm wondering, what's mindless meditation? I never heard of that. So it's just to get in on the act of being in on the latest thing. Now, in concluding, here's a very important thing. No definition I've ever run across in all of my research makes any reference to thinking, to the conceptual level of functioning. Never is that in the list anywhere. The rational faculty is not there. So this is a very funny concept, mindfulness without a mind. Because your rational faculty is your basic means of survival. So here's my advice. If you want to do some of these things, fine. But don't be snookered by the term. If you want to get into an argument with a friend, it's simple. Say, tell me what you mean. Tell me what you mean by this. And you'll find out it already has a name. Psychology loves to have fads. This is the latest one. There'll be another one next year. There was one more last year. But don't be swayed by this. It's a mess. Jean.
Thank you, Ed. So, of course, I agree with Ellen that the big philosophical issue you need to understand in order to avoid burnout is altruism and why that's wrong and how that completely destroys your life and your motivation for work. And I completely agree with Ed that it's not just enough to know that altruism is wrong, you need to set goals that are actually selfish and work toward those. And I think my understanding of the mindfulness, which I think you would agree with me, is that the reason people get attracted to it is that there's a certain element of monitoring that comes up in mindfulness. Mm-hmm. And if you have a goal, you do need to monitor your progress to the goal. You need to know what's happening in reality. But the big thing, as Ed says, you need to be able to engage your mind to figure out what your next step is. And my personal experience with burnout is relevant to what I've learned about how you engage your brain in the moment in such a way that over the long term you don't burn out. So let me just give you my history in a few sentences. I've written this down so that I can actually keep it to a few sentences. So I was a successful engineer at the age of 24. I was a project manager. I had worked on an amazing project, the first system to demonstrate laser guide star adaptive optics, which is a technology that has revolutionized the science of astronomy. And it was extremely exciting. I worked with an amazing team with a visionary leader. And despite all of that, after a few years, I burned out because I didn't have a firsthand interest in that work. I went into engineering because I was good at math and science. Literally, everyone in my immediate family has an engineering degree. Mother, father, sister, brother, me. Everyone has an engineering degree. And I'm good at it. But that is not enough to create a career. So fortunately, it turns out Ayn Rand opened up the humanities to me, and I realized I was more interested in how to solve the problems than in the problems I was solving. So I went back to school. I got a master's in psychology. I graduated from the Objectivist Graduate Center, which was a 2-year full-time program, which was amazing, VRI. And I put out a shingle teaching thinking skills. And I am wildly, first-handedly, passionately going after my goal, which is to understand how you grow your mind. Everything about how to grow your mind, that's what I'm doing. But that hasn't stopped me from burning out. I've burned out in various ways, at various times that I've had to learn from that. Since I'm interested in the mental side, I've learned a lot from that. The most spectacular burnout I had in my history was in 2006, which was 10 years after I graduated from the OGC. And I had my business up and running, and I had 5 workshops scheduled in 5 weeks in Baltimore, Toronto, Ottawa, and in the middle of that, I was supposed to take a 5-day training in North Carolina. And a couple weeks before this big push, I got laryngitis, which is basically, you get laryngitis when you're running too hard. So what did I do? Well, I did cancel the training, but I pushed through all of the rest. And the effect of that was after I got back from Ottawa, I crashed. That was the last of the 5. And I wasn't able to work again for 9 months. I actually triggered an Epstein-Barr virus, which is in your body. It's not interesting medically. But the effect of it, it's a fatigue disease. And I literally couldn't work. I remember I was supposed to give a workshop in LA in January. This all happened in October, November, December. And I was supposed to send a registration letter. Now, a registration letter is not a challenging mental activity. And I remember dragging myself to the computer. I just need to get this registration letter out to the 10 people who had signed up for this workshop. And I couldn't, I just collapsed. At which point I realized, okay, I guess I need to cancel this workshop. And the biggest challenge I faced during this time was to stop trying to work. Because the work actually fed the vicious cycle of the fatigue. I would get a little energy, I'd work, and then I would crash again. And so to pull out of the illness, I had to focus entirely on meeting my physical needs, especially sleep and exercise. And I learned how to really carefully monitor my energy expenditure so that I did not deplete my reserves. That was the dramatic case. I'm going to skip over all the little mini burnouts that I've had over the years while pursuing a passionate, rational, selfish top goal. And I just want to tell you my conclusion. It's not enough to have a selfish goal. You need to learn how to act selfishly in the moment. In the moment, you need to be able to hold the full context. You need to learn how to choose in the moment based on all your values, not rules, not feelings. not your predetermined expectation of what the right thing to do would be in this circumstance. You need to choose based on values, not feelings or rules. Now, the way this comes up in a practical way is every time you think, I have to do something, those words don't come up unless you feel like you have to do it, and for some reason you don't really want to do it. That only comes up, you only say, I have to do this, when you've got a little conflict over that. And the basic advice I'm going to give is whenever you experience that conflict, check your premises. Check your premises. You are trying to force yourself to act now on a past prediction of what is best for you right now. You know, there's a line in Galt's speech about that stale carcass of your past thinking that you forbade your mind to revise. At this moment, when you feel like I have to do this, and something is saying no, it's your past thinking that's saying you have to do this. Now, your past thinking may be right. It may be that this emotion is wrong. But you don't know that until you actually look at it. This is the moment where at some level you know you're wrong, because when you say I have to, you're saying I have no choice. You do have a choice. Metaphysically, you have a choice. We have free will. You don't have to do anything. Another line from Ayn Rand's Causality versus Duty, she quotes the woman who says, I don't have to do anything but die. Your old thinking may be correct, but if you're feeling conflict, there is some value at stake that is not completely clear to you. And this is what the problem is in these moments, is that the thinking of what you should do is very clear. You've actually put time into that. You've reached conclusions about that. And this other thing is sort of inarticulate. But logic requires that you hold the full context of knowledge and values before making a decision. You need to do a little due diligence to identify what is that value at stake. Now, the thing that makes this really tricky is that we often label that other voice as resistance or temptation. It often appears very illogical on the surface. And that, you can see an immediate explanation for why you should pay no attention to that. It doesn't make any sense. And the mind shift that I've gone through, and that I hope I'm going to encourage you to go through, is to realize the self-respectful perspective in that situation is realize, yes, the superficial thing here that I'm hearing may actually be illogical, but there is some value at stake, and it's my value. You know, Ayn Rand says, yourself is your mind and its chosen values. You would not have that emotion unless there's some value. It may be very distorted and turned into some illogical second-handed reason, but it means you need somehow to get back to what that is. Let me just give an example of how this can work. Now, I'm going to give you, in Dr. Binswanger's class this morning, he said you should give big examples. I'm going to give you a parochial example, because in the moment when you feel like I have to, it's very parochial and it's very personal, and it's your conflict and it matters to you. And I want you to get the idea that it's not always life and death issues that you need to be able to see the selfish issue. It's at that moment when the rubber hits the road and it's you're making a choice about your work. That's when you really need to know how to be selfish. So this is an example story. I'm going to call her Midge. Midge is the name of my first Barbie doll, and I've never had a client called Midge. So that's a great name to use. Okay. Some of you know how old I am by saying Midge was my first Barbie doll. So she was supposed to be working on a grant proposal, and she was procrastinating on it. And this is someone, Midge was very sweet, very conscientious. She didn't understand why she was procrastinating on this grant proposal. And I had her do an exercise. It's called complaining. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in the question period if you're interested. And she went through it, and she thought she should just write the grant proposal. But when she did the complaining exercise, she realized, oh, the reason she was procrastinating is that At the back of her mind was a sense, oh, she actually needed to go out and send a survey to a bunch of people and get a response. And if she didn't do that right now, there wasn't going to be time to get the response, get the data, and factor it into the grant proposal. And this was not in her mind, but by paying attention to that conflict she was feeling, even though she thought it was irrational, she went back and she actually found a real value at stake, and she changed her plan. And she got that out, worked totally unblocked, got the proposal in. Big success story. Because she was respectful about the fact that she was feeling conflict. Now, I want you to understand, this is not saying take the path of least resistance, and I think this is another place where the mindfulness people, because they're Buddhists, they tend to send you off to the path of least resistance. If you have goals, the path of least resistance doesn't go anywhere in particular. If you have a goal, you need to put in a little effort to keep on the path. You'll never achieve your goals if you just do the thing that you feel like. The truth is, what you really need to avoid burnout is to use your willpower effectively. You need to use it on small steps that can move you toward your goal. If you're feeling resistance, it's very likely you're trying to take too big a step. So in this case, Midge was actually trying to write a report without actually having all the knowledge. She was trying to do too big a step at once, and that's one of the reasons she ran into trouble. The real test here is that feeling of conflict, of I have to, but I don't want to. And I think a helpful perspective on this is, just as it's wrong to force another person, it is wrong to force yourself. If you use willpower to force yourself to act against strong resistance, 3 things will happen. First of all, guaranteed, you will be missing part of the picture of what this decision is. You will be, when you force yourself to act based on this is what I should do, even though I don't want to, you are saying, whatever that other stuff is, it's not relevant, I am just going to do what I think I should do, and you're putting on blinders. You do not know. You literally don't know what it is that you're ignoring. That's not a good plan. The second, that's logical. The second thing is automatic psychological. Actually, it's really, the second and third are really one psychological thing. When you force yourself to work, what do? You kind of gird your loins, you tense up, you block out the feelings. You wind up associating that unpleasantness with your work. Now, if you have set a selfish goal and you have a mission that you're on that's important to you, why would you ever want to associate that suffering and that unpleasantness with working on that goal? Because if you do that, and if you do it consistently, you will actually start hating your work. I mean, I had the experience that this is a lesser burnout version. I give all these workshops, and the way that I prepared for the workshops, I would just kill myself. And I noticed at a certain point, I didn't want to schedule any more workshops. Because I was predicting I was going to kill myself, and that was going to be really awful, and then I was going to collapse again. You do not want to associate that kind of suffering with your chosen goal. When you have a big goal, the question is not how do you motivate yourself. The problem is not how do you motivate yourself, it's how do you, in the moment, see your real choice, the real choice you face, and hold your full value context. If you're feeling an emotion, some value of yours is actually at stake. They're really kind of 2 basic things. Either it could be threatened, in which case you've got some negative emotion, maybe fear, or it may be that there's a possibility there that you weren't aware of, and so you're feeling some desire. And so temptation is you're feeling a desire to get a goal, and resistance is you're feeling a fear that something's going to be hurt. But you don't know what it is, and at some level you need to know. Now, the trick is, What do you do if it's old baggage? Sometimes if you just stop, say, where does that emotion come from? Do a little introspection. You see what it is. Boom. You see, okay, I need to take these steps to get this grant proposal done, whatever it is. Very easy done. It's a no-brainer. Other times, you find that you're actually still in conflict, and it seems to be some old baggage. And isn't it, we don't want to act on our emotions. We don't want to act on old secondhand premises. What do you do then? Well, this again is where I think you really need a method that helps you in the moment to make a conscious choice based on your whole value context. Let me give you a little story of how this comes up. This happened last Thanksgiving. I had to deal with a little old baggage. So I visited my family in New Jersey, and on that trip, I found out they weren't going to be able to visit me for Christmas as I understood had been planned. It hadn't really been planned, but I thought that that was the idea. And I had planned my December, I'd planned my work for December on the assumption that they would be coming to me instead of I going to them. And this was an issue because it takes a lot more time to take out and take the trip yourself. So when I went home, I thought, oh no, I'm not going to see my family at Christmas. And I was wildly distracted. I actually couldn't settle down and work on my book, which is my top concrete goal, is finishing my book. So I took some time and I introspected, and I realized that I had old baggage about Christmas. Now, this is not so uncommon, right? And it had all been triggered by this thing of actually thinking that I wasn't going to be with my mother and my brother and my sister and my niece and nephew and sister-in-law. And this old baggage was enough that it was actually interfering with work. Now, my view is, altruism is a big deal to get rid of. How do you do it? Well, you can't just logic yourself out of altruism. But you can, at the moment when you're being pulled between whether you're going to go home for Christmas or work on your book, you can say, okay, so this is a concrete situation where my old altruistic and secondhand premises are getting the best of me, and I am going to really understand the values here. And the important thing here is not to say, oh, this is secondhanded, I just want, I didn't have a good reason for going up to New Jersey with the family. I actually did not have a logical reason for doing it. But I was so distressed by it, I realized, you know what? If I don't commit to going up, I'm going to be distracted for all of December, and I'm not going to be able to finish my book. Which I think was a very accurate prediction. So here I am. I'm in the situation where I have old baggage. I don't know what the issue is. I'm aware that I don't know all the values at stake. So what did I do? I needed a way to deal with that. So what the concrete thing I did was I didn't drop the book. The book was too important, but I did drop a couple of lesser projects that I had planned to do in December. I added a short trip home. I left actually Christmas afternoon. I went up to New Jersey and I spent 2.5 days with the rest of my family so that I would no longer be distracted about not going up there. But I also committed to spend a little time, not every day, but several days a week, thinking about Christmas and what was going on here, actually sorting through all of these emotions, because I knew I wasn't going to solve it in a short time. Now, the result of this was, not only did I finish a draft of the book on January 2nd, so I didn't interfere with that, but I also had the best Christmas I've had in years. We put up lights on our house for the first time. I've never done that. We bought decorations and for that. I played Christmas carols on my flute like 7 or 8 times during the Christmas season. And I created a new tradition with my niece and nephew, which really changed the experience of Christmas with my extended family. So this would not have happened if I had had the idea, I know that's wrong, I don't have a logical reason for going up, I should just work on the book. The truth is that would have been unrealistic. And if I had just forced myself to do it, I would have hated that, and I would have been miserable, and it would have been a disaster. So just as you don't make demands of other people, don't make demands of yourself. Ask yourself, am I willing to take this step? You want to use your willpower on steps that are a little uncomfortable, but you're willing to do. You want to always take that goal that you have and bring it back to the present, to some step that you can take that you can see is going to lead to the goal, to the best that you can tell, but that you're willing to do. To stop burning out, I needed to learn a method to make decisions in the moment that respected my whole self. I needed to understand what Ayn Rand said. Yourself is your mind and its chosen values. I needed to learn to make choices based on values, not feelings or rules. And that means notice that you're in conflict. Find the rational element on both sides of the conflict. And if you can't immediately figure that out, find a step that you can take that will help you get the information you need so you can eventually resolve that conflict. Now, there are a lot of tactics you can use for this. The basic tactic is introspection. The all-purpose general tool is called thinking on paper, which is you write out your thoughts as you're going. But I'll tell you, the number one thing is to make the change to say, I am not going to force my mind. You cannot force a mind, even your own. You can force your action. But if you feel like you need to force your step back, understand the full value context, and choose a step toward your goal that you can take willingly. That's the way you can make sustainable action toward a big, important goal without burning out. That's my advice to you.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Okay, we have about 25 minutes for questions. Are there microphones?
Over here.
You talked about people who burned out and changed careers. I know of many people who have changed careers, but not because they burned out. And perhaps you could discuss this. Some of them got as far as they could in a certain career, and they accomplished everything they wanted to, and they had a blast doing it, but then they were done, and they were looking for something else or new opportunities. Also, a lot of people change careers because they evolved. They became less interested in this and more interested in that, and decided, for instance, I know a physicist who went into biology because there were all kinds of opportunities opening up in stem cell research and the Human Genome Project and so forth. So could you talk about career changes prompted by outgrowing or accomplishing your goals in one field or because of evolution?
I don't think that's really on our topic today. If you want to change careers because you found a new interest, great.
Yeah.
Go for it. But our panel's on burnout.
Okay.
So nothing wrong with changing careers. You find a new
Ayn
interest.
Rand sort of changed careers, right? She stopped writing fiction and worked on all nonfiction.
And her husband had 4 careers, I think.
Yeah. It's a good thing.
So you've talked a lot about dealing with altruism, but I think one thing I struggle with, I'm in one of those helping professions, I'm a nurse, or a veterinary nurse, is team-oriented thought. Is there a difference between that and altruism?
Oh, this is a great question. Here's my favorite. I'm glad you asked that. Team sports. And every commentator says, Joe Smith is a great team member because he sacrifices himself for the team. What the hell is that about? So, want to sacrifice yourself, then why not lose all your games? Because the other team's got their feelings hurt. What the hell is that? So, a selfish team member does what's required to win, right? So I really am offended by these constant, oh, he sacrificed for the team. What is he supposed to do?
So
That's crazy.
I could say something briefly that if you're on a team, The main thing is to never betray yourself, to hold on to your ideas and your contribution rather than feel the pressure to buckle under and just go along to get along. You choose your battles, obviously, but it's just, you have your ideas and you don't have to battle, you just present them.
And the thing I'd like to add is that teamwork is an objective value, right? I think John Allison has it on his list of the top, or put it on the list of the top BB&T values. Cooperation, particularly in a business, is essential. I mean, a business is an organization of people who are cooperating to achieve some goal. So I think it can also be very helpful to understand the rational elements. When people are trying to talk you into agreeing with them, you need to be able to get at what is the deep rational value, and here are a few off the top of my head. So cooperation, right, the idea that there is a joint goal. Okay, you need to know what that is. Everyone actually needs to know what the joint goal is. If there isn't a leader making that clear, you can pipe up from the benches and say, hey, what's the joint goal here? You need to be aligned around that, or else there's really no hope of cooperation. Two other deep rational values associated with cooperation are support and contribution. So if you're on a team, and like on a basketball team, actually, I'm not sure I know enough about basketball to say that. Let's go to the veterinary office. But suppose that the veterinarian is involved in something very complex that requires a lot of concentration, and there's something you can do to offload his or her job so that he or she doesn't have to be bothered by that. You would be doing that to support the vet in achieving the joint goal. It's not a sacrifice. You're actually helping that vet do the job better because you want to get the overall goal. So support, that's completely rational in a team situation. And contribution is also, if you're on a team and someone else does all the work, you can feel very left out. You actually have the joint goal and you want to be doing something. This is something I think ARI is actually getting its contributors to be part of the mission, because we all want to contribute to the objectivist movement. We don't want to just sit at the side. We want to be on the team making it happen. And so helping can often be cast as altruistic, but there's a very rational reason that you might support another team member or encourage a team member to contribute to the joint goal. So you need to translate it into rational values.
Let me add to that. If you're going to be in a team, you need to selfishly develop your skill. Otherwise, why the hell are you there, right?
Yeah.
So it's your job to develop your skills so you can fill your role, assuming you're committed to the team's goal, which in sports is winning.
Right.
So you're a bum if you let other people do all the work and you don't try to do your part. So
it's consistent. It's completely consistent with rational egoism. And then the one other thing I'll say is communication skills, of course, are also very important, because if you get a miscommunication, that can mess things up. But learning objective communication skills can help a lot. Does that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
Alan, did you?
I was going to ask, I know there's
Yeah,
a long
sorry.
line, though. One last thing. I think going in there, we don't know your specific situation, which means we really need your example, but we don't have the time now. But going in there, if you're on the premise of what Jean's mentioning, collaboration, it's much better than if you go into a meeting thinking, oh, here we go again. And so if you can hold on to collaboration, recognizing that there might be a few people who are really nasty, and then you need to really do what Jean would call an empathy bath. You need to be very good to yourself. This is tough. I know this is tough. Hold tight. This person is so boiling over right now. I'm not going to address them now. I'll go back to the drawing board and figure out how to do things later. So
Yeah. Maintain your own emotion.
maintain
Yeah.
yourself.
Hello. I'm wondering, I know two of you are psychologists. Where do you draw the line between selfishness, as in objectivist terms, which I totally agree with, and malignant narcissism?
Good one. It's in our romance book, by the way.
Yes.
The issue of narcissism and romance doesn't. Here's the thing: narcissism is a me-only world. Altruism is a you-only world. Now, we talk in our romance book, it's a lethal combination because the narcissist likes the person obeying them, and the obedient person thinks they're doing the right thing by doing what the narcissist wants. It doesn't work out very well. For one thing, the narcissist gets tired when they want new worshipers. So there are two sides of the wrong coin. Two sides of the wrong coin. So in a romance, it's mutual egoism, as our book says. Mutual egoism. Let's both get what we want in every way we can by good discussions, by good planning. If we're completely off track, obviously we're not matched right. But the ideal is, you're always going to have differences. You're always going to have disagreement. How can we both get what we want as much as we can? So that's what. Does that answer your question?
Then I'll add.
Yeah.
Oh, the book is The Selfish Path to Romance: How to Love with Passion and Reason. Tell me what my parents thought and said to me when they heard the title. So we don't mean selfish that way. We mean it as self-esteem, self-nurturing, self-valuing for both people, and learning how to be lovingly honest with one another. And written more broadly, it means with any relation, in any relationships that you have, you want to be honest and true to yourself, and hoping the other person is honest and true to their selves, and so it's win-win. It's not me only, my way or the highway.
The book's available. Are we allowed to say this?
At popular prices, I can say it. Their book is available at popular prices in the
Okay.
for the. Are you signing it?
Yeah, they can come to the book signing. We'll be
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
Can I just say one thing
Oh, yeah,
too?
please.
Yeah.
Because I just want to say what the positive is, right? So you hear the false alternative. Well, the positive point is other people are a huge value. Other people are a huge value. The division of labor lets us have this wealth. If you didn't have other people, you would be on a self-sufficient farm starving, right? Other people are a huge value, and the challenge is to judge other people objectively so you can see to what extent there is a shared value. And in a few cases, some really small minority, there are people who are evil. Most people are mixed. Some people are essentially good. And you need to judge that to see to what extent this particular person is a value to you. But a mixed person, you want to relate with their values. A good person, you want to embrace as much as you can. Evil, okay, you stay away from that. But people are a value. So that's the thing that narcissists are crazy. Other people are a value.
Question for Ed. Until recently, I've also been reading a lot and hearing a lot about mindfulness from a lot of very different sources.
Yeah.
And it all seemed like mindfulness soup to me. I couldn't quite put my finger, what are these people talking about? So I decided to really look into it, and I read a book on it, which perfectly explained exactly what it was to me. The book was The Mindful Way Through Depression. And I found that mindfulness is like a modern repackaging of a kind of taboo concept in psychology, which is introspection. So basically, all the 15 disparate things you said, which were the different definitions of mindfulness, which didn't fit together, so it was vague bucket concepts. Actually, those fit together very well as facets of or results of or possible benefits from mindfulness, which is basically paying non-judgmental, detached attention to your experience, which is just basically observing yourself, observing your own mind, observing your own experience, which is the first step in any scientific process and any rational, any conceptual process, to first have the experiential, real-world observation of what's going on within you and in your interaction with the world. So I guess the question is, having heard that, would you reconsider your opinion that mindfulness is an invalid bucket concept?
No. Now, you made an important point. Introspection, which has never been part of any definition I've ever read, but there's so many, I can't keep track of them all, but I did a lot of research. Introspection's a very important thing in your life, because you need to understand, 15 minutes, you need to understand the contents and processes in your own mind, because if you don't, it'll feel mysterious. And you may feel possessed because of this feeding from the subconscious, and maybe there's terrible people down there feeding you horrible things and you're evil. Introspection's important, and there's a word for it. It's called introspection. Okay?
Yeah. And mindfulness happens to be another word which
hold
is
on.
more
Okay,
acceptable.
so you're adding 19 definitions. I'm sorry,
It's an
I can't go
unnecessary
there.
addition, I think, too. I prefer the word introspection. But
Hold on one second, because I also have something I think will help perhaps bridge this gap. Because I think one of the reasons, I'm guessing, that one of the reasons you're concerned about this is that you found some value from this book, which has been recommended, I think, by Gina Gorlin, right? I hear it's a pretty good book, right?
it explained
And
the
you learned
concepts very
something that
well.
you needed to know. So here's the thing. If you have an objectivist background, there is a lot of psychology out there that is not been written from an objectivist perspective, but when you read it from an objectivist perspective, you can see, oh, they're trying to get me to be aware of reality. Oh, they're trying to get me to be aware of my feelings. Oh, they're trying to get me to introspect. And you basically reconceive it from a proper philosophic context. And that is actually absolutely necessary if you read any mainstream psychology stuff. But the fact that you can reconceive it doesn't necessarily mean that their conceptualization is right. And I'm totally in Ed's camp in the sense that we have the right word and we should use the right word for that, particularly because there are definitely people who are using mindfulness in the wrong way.
Right.
But that's a conceptual purity issue, not an issue of the particular benefits that you got from reading that book.
And let me stress, introspection requires hard conceptual thinking,
Yes.
which has never been in any definition or description I've ever seen, including in journal articles.
And-
So go for introspection,
Yeah.
by all means.
So again, it's being value focused. And when I had some clients who were very much struggling with borderline personality disorder, you don't even know your own sense of identity. And they had to go inpatient, and many times they went through programs called dialectical behavioral therapy. Go figure. And mindfulness was a big piece of that. But when I actually looked at some of it was nuts. Some of it was very good. It was cognitive therapy, skills and training, communication skills. So again, it's a package, and I love what
Take the
Jean
good.
said, take the good from it and milk it.
Thank you.
Ellen, as you were talking about the symptoms of burnout, I was saying to myself, isn't that depression?
Yes. I was hoping someone would say that.
The question is,
I think depression could have it could have a biological cause. I know that anytime, this is an odd thing to say, but anytime that Harris could always tell when I was getting my monthly, because I would burst into tears randomly at some point, and it didn't have anything to do with anything. So we know that things can be they can be bottom up from the biochemistry, or from drugs, or from substances you're using. But a lot of depression is caused by values, by lack of values, by altruism. And that's why I love therapy, because people would come in and say to me, my mother had depression, my grandmother had depression, and my doctor has said I just have to be on medications for life and I'll be depressed for life. What do you say to them? I say, well, you're welcome to keep that viewpoint. I can't force mine. I said, would you be willing to listen to an alternative or interested? And I said that one is that let me take a listen at what's going on in your life. And I've seen people that have been able to lift depression by learning more about themselves and learning how to love their lives. And many people much prefer that route, and they get better a whole lot faster. So yes.
so if I understand you correctly, if someone is experiencing these symptoms, it's not advisable to ask, is it burnout or is it depression? You're saying
I
burnout
think
is-
burnout is a metaphor. You know, I think rocket fuel, right? You burnt out your rocket fuel. But it is a way to capture what doctors are going through right now. They're burning out left and right. I don't know if anyone here has been to a doctor who just kind of says, what are you here for? Or they just take 2 minutes with you. Or one, I went to a skin doctor, and he basically, I had a list of things. It was, what do you want? And I said, I have a question about Harris. No, no. And it was like, oh my gosh, she retired very soon after. I think it was needed. But doctors are burning out. People in the medical profession are burning out, and they probably would be considered clinically depressed. And I have a problem also with heavy labels like depression. Once you get it, you feel like you're stuck with it for life. I don't like that. I like peel and sticks that can come off, you know?
There's also an issue of lack of purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm 80 years old and been retired for 18 years, but I don't know if I was fortunate or I was purposeful. I love what I'm doing and I still write, and that's great. But everyone who retires doesn't have a purpose, and they can get very depressed after 2 weeks of golf. Because they can't find a further purpose. What was the ice skater?
Oh, we had a wonderful example in our book about an ice skater who won the Olympics, but she only had one goal in life, and that was to win the Olympics. Oh, help me out.
I forget.
Anyway, and she's standing there on the podium, just feeling great that she has her one goal, and at the same moment, she gets this, or very soon after, what else is there in life? I didn't have a backup plan. You need to have a backup plan. You want to have multiple areas in your life that are growing. Romance, hobbies, skills.
Same thing for astronauts.
Yeah.
I went to the moon. My God, it's the best thing that ever happened in the whole world.
Yeah, right.
Now what?
Yeah, right. How do you top that?
Yeah.
Right.
So you need purpose in life, and if you don't have purpose, you tend to die early.
Thank you.
So there are multiple causes of depression as well.
Right, that's it. That's a good
Burnout
point.
being one.
I was wondering if any one of you could comment briefly on the concept of gratitude and whether that's a valid tool to, help address burnout.
I'm actually writing an article on gratitude and have burnt out writing it, and I need to re-energize myself. I did so much work on it. I've read books on it. I've read, just like the Burnout Diary, I read wonderful little book on gratitude. I think gratitude from a healthy perspective is wonderful. You love giving it. Your kids do something nice and you thank them and they feel visible. You're very specific in what you do. Gratitude but I had a love-hate relationship with this word. I even wrote a short article on it because it was always this duty thing. Write a thank you note. You have to, you must, forcing your mind, right? But gratitude starts with yourself. You want to have gratitude for the things you've accomplished. Many people don't stop to look at what they've done in their lives and feel good about them. Let it simmer a bit. That's pride, right? But then you want to have it there are many times you'll see something you like or hear something you like that someone else does, and you zip your lips. You don't tell them. They can't read your mind. When you tell them specifically something that you appreciate that they did, then they feel good, because if it's accurate, you don't overstate it, and you feel good. You don't understate it either, and you feel good, and it's a win-win situation, and your best friends are going to be those that see the best in you and tell you.
It's the virtue of justice, too,
Yes,
right?
Can I add something to that? Are you thinking of things like having a gratitude journal to improve, like Martin Seligman, am I pronouncing his name right?
Mhm.
Seligman.
Yes.
Suggests you write you do a gratitude journal, 3 things you're grateful for every day. Is this the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Well, I think, personally, I've experienced burnout in the past because I have a tendency to focus too much on what I'm lacking and what I don't have and what I haven't accomplished yet. So
Okay.
that prompted the question.
Right, so you want to actually see work from the positives that you do have. I think that's actually very important. Well, so I just want to say, you know what, I'm going to say what I was going to say and then tie it to what you just said. So this idea of writing down 3 things you're grateful for a day, when I read this is the kind of thing that I think you need to use philosophic detection on. Because grateful means you're thankful that someone else did this for you. Great gratitude is about another person having done something good for you. And when you read these people who talk about gratitude, God often comes into it. Because if it wasn't another person, it was God who did it for you. Of course, we don't believe in God. And so it mixes together. It's like everything good for you had to have come from another person or from God. So the first thing you need to do is you need to separate out, as Ellen said, you need to separate pride from gratitude. And so I changed Seligman's exercise to just name 3 good things that happened today. And then you can look at them and see, did I make that happen? Or did someone else do something nice for me? And it's important to see, wow, I made that happen. I made that choice to, this is a silly thing, but I gave a workshop on Friday, and I asked a couple of my friends to bring some vegetables, because the avocados and tomatoes, because the stuff that was going to be provided by the hotel was not going to have very many vegetables, and it really makes a difference to me if I can eat some avocado and tomatoes and things.
By the way, I want to add something to your comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, can I just,
Yeah,
I'll wrap it up and then
yeah.
you can do it. And the point is, I did feel good as a result of that, and I take credit for that. I have both gratitude to my friends who brought it and pride that I made the request. And so this is part of how you learn. I do actually think I recommend this exercise, 3 good things every day. It does help you to see the good things in your life and to see them in the small area and conceptualize why they're good can actually start moving you more toward happiness.
When you have long-term goals, which is your first comment, the implication, it's extremely important to have proximal goals
Yes.
that move you along the way. If you focus only on future goals, then you're ignoring happiness in the present.
Yep.
So give yourself credit for progress toward the long-term goal. And even if you maybe never reach the long-term goal, you can feel satisfied and proud and happy because you've come that far. But if you focus exclusively on the future, that's a mistake. You want pleasure in the present, right? That's why we love art. And we want pleasure for how our life is going for the future.
You need to see success from the steps you're taking now.
And one more point. You want to ban from your mind. You want to hear these as if someone's saying the F word. What's wrong with me? What's the matter? Why? These, again, I mentioned this in my talk. They're called negative rhetorical questions. I call them bogus questions. They're very damaging because if I said to myself, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I finish that article? What's my subconscious going to answer?
You dummy, you.
You're bad.
I love my subconscious. You're an idiot. You know, there's something terribly wrong with you. Or why's the world set against me? It just is, Ellen. It just is. So get those questions out. You want productive questions. Right. Any of those questions can be translated into genuine value-seeking questions, such as, what's wrong with me? You can change to, what would I like to improve? Or what's the very next step, like Ed's saying, that I can take to get into that exercise plan or that diet plan or to look for a career? And just get those other questions out.
They come from old baggage.
They come from old baggage. Yeah.
Right. And it may be something that it's really helpful to realize you've got some Megillah here that is going to take some time to untangle, but it can be untangled.
Yeah.
Can always be untangled.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful.
The thing I'm asking about is to see if you have some examples of how to look at the continuum for actions that are from altruism to ones that are benevolent helpfulness. So there was a comment earlier about the proper way to be in a team. And yet there could be others that are there. And I'm asking in part because I don't know how to answer it myself. And I also heard that, you know, there's some 200 people in the room, or in the conference, who are here for the first time. and the idea of altruism, wait a minute, isn't that good? You know, you don't quite see the contrast.
So
And-
it's not a continuum, Harry. This is the really interesting thing, is it's not the concrete choice you take. Like suppose, let's get a specific team situation. What's something that might be altruistic that you might do on a team?
Pass the ball. Basketball.
On basketball?
Pass
Oh,
the
pass
ball.
the ball.
Pass the ball.
Okay, great. Terrific. I know very little about basketball. Okay.
It's the one that's round.
And you hold it like this? Okay. Okay, so passing the ball, right? So you could pass the ball because, oh, I'm no good. Michael Jordan is on the team. He's the one who should make the basket. Okay, that's a second-handed and maybe altruistic reason for doing it. But if you say, oh, I'm covered, but he's open, that's selfish. The same action, the passing the ball, could be selfish or altruistic. It depends on your reason. And the only way you can tell, you cannot tell from observation directly whether a particular action that someone else takes is selfish or altruistic. The person himself can only tell by actually introspecting what was the reason for doing it. Was it because this is going toward my selfish goal? Or was this because I'm afraid what people will say, this is what they're expecting me to do, who am I to try to make a basket? You know, it all has to do with the reason for what you're doing. And what we're saying is, sometimes the action that you should take, I have a friend, I've been in Toastmasters a long time, since like 2000. And I gave a whole bunch of speeches on objectivism the first 5 years. It was not a pretty sight, actually. But I had this friend, Louis Rimpel, who after these speeches, he came up to me and said, you're not selfish, you're a total altruist. Because I put a lot of work into the club. But I did it because it was a big value to me. So you can't tell by the superficial actions whether something is selfish or altruistic. You need to actually know what your motivation is. And so that gets back to the point of being present and actually understanding why you're doing what you're doing and actually know how it ties into your long-range selfish purpose.
Here's another aspect of this. Don't forget, as objectivists, everyone's not our enemy because we don't believe we're slaves of society. So we do things out of goodwill.
Yeah. Which is
Right.
If I'm on a
Generosity.
plane and an 80-year-old lady's trying to lift her bag, I help her with it, okay, if I'm next to her. Our neighbors' dogs get out sometimes. So if I can't round them up, I call the neighbor. We have her cell phone, say your dogs are out and I don't know where they went. Now, would I take care of the dogs every day? No, but that's goodwill of a nice neighbor.
Right.
You have a relationship with your neighbor and you're you're contributing to
So our
your
general
neighbor.
attitude toward other is basically goodwill, unless there's reason otherwise. We're not exploited. We're not sacrificing. Would I take care of the dogs 24 hours a day? No.
So it's really the intention then and the motivation behind
Right.
it of why you're
And
doing something.
I have found that objectivists are far more benevolent than altruists. Because they're happy with their own lives, they're happy with themselves, they're growing themselves, and they want the same for others. Whereas if you have an altruist in your own family even, and you're succeeding, see how that fails.
They're resentful.
They're resentful, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you,
So
everybody.
anyway, oh, thank you. Thank you.